What is going on, guys? This is Crozin, and welcome back to Baldur's Gate 3. I feel like Baldur's Gate 3 is the game of the month right now, especially with patch number 7. Just added a lot of nice changes to this game and mod support and everything else. So there's a lot of people looking for builds right now. And one thing that I didn't do with a lot of my Baldur's Gate 3 builds is I didn't really make a lot of companion builds. So with this one, we're going to go with a HALSIN pure Moon Druid build. I know there's a lot of people who like to mix Cleric and Sorcerer and Wizard and Fighter with HALSIN, but with HALSIN's background, those don't really make a lot of sense. So this one kind of tries to keep it to how HALSIN is in this game, and Pure Moon Druid fits him the best in my opinion, and it's actually pretty effective too. So let's take a look at the build. So taking a look at our ability points, there's really only 3 ability points that make any sense for a Moon Druid, and those are Constitution, Wisdom, and Dexterity. So Constitution is going to keep you alive, Wisdom is nice for any kind of Druid spells, and then Dexterity is good for your initiative while you are in human form. It does not carry over to wild shape form, so just keep that in mind. So I go for 17 Constitution, 16 Wisdom, and 15 Dexterity. The rest of the ability points I just lower down to 8. And then for the skill proficiencies, I go for Animal Handling and Medicine. You could also go for Insight here if you wish. And then for the 2 cantrips, I go for Guidance and Thorn Whip. So now we could go through the level progression all the way up to level 12. So for the subclass, just choose Circle of the Moon. And for the 5 prepared spells, I like to go with Long Strider, Create or Destroy Water, Speak with Animals, Healing Word, and Entangle. So at level 3, we learn level 2 spells. The ones that I like to go for here are Spike Growth and Enhance Ability. You could also go for Heat Metal, as this is pretty useful if you need certain enemies to drop their weapons early on in Act 1. At level 4, we get our first feat, and the most important feat to always get at level 4 if you're playing a Moon Druid is Tavern Brawler. So you want to go ahead and put this extra point in Constitution, and this is going to improve not only your attack rolls but also your damage rolls. Unless you are in Honor mode, then it only works on the attack rolls, but it's still super useful because it makes it to where you're almost never going to miss in your wild shape forms. And then for the extra cantrip, I just select the Shillelagh here. So at level 5, we get our extra attack while we are in wild shape, and we also learn level 3 spells. The 2 level 3 spells that I like here are Call Lightning and Plant Growth. So at level 6, you get one of the forms that is going to last you until at least level 10, and that is the Owlbear, so make sure that you prioritize using that wild shape. At level 7, we unlock level 4 spells. The 2 that I like the most here would have to be Freedom of Movement and Conjure Woodland Being. You could also go for Conjure Minor Elemental, but the Minor Elementals aren't as powerful as the Woodland Being. The Woodland Being can actually summon Spike Growth, and it could also summon its own summon, so to speak. So definitely a lot more powerful than the Conjure Minor Elemental, and Freedom of Movement is always nice. So at level 8, you unlock your second feat, and you also get a very powerful wild shape form in the Saber-Toothed Tiger. The Saber-Toothed Tiger is going to be very powerful for single target DPS on any kind of enemy that you can knock prone because it has a nice combination. So if you are fighting a high level boss or a high HP enemy, then a Saber-Toothed Tiger is my preferred wild shape. Otherwise, if it is an AoE fight, then you can just stick to the Owlbear. Now for the second feat, you have 2 options here. One involves doing a respec at level 10, the other involves doing no respec and just getting this now, and that is Weapon Master. So at level 10, you will unlock your Myrmidon forms, and the biggest issue with the Myrmidon forms is that they don't come with their weapon proficiencies from a Druid. So the Air Myrmidon and the Water Myrmidon are basically going to be lacking unless you get Weapon Master. So what you need to do here is get the Flail proficiency for the Air Myrmidon, and get the Trident proficiency for the Water Myrmidon, and then at that point you can just pick whatever else you want here. It's really not going to matter. I just select the Glaive and also the Hand Crossbow, and make sure you get this extra point in Dexterity, as that will give you higher initiative in your human form. The second option is go for Alert here, and you can have Alert for 2 levels until you hit level 10, and then go ahead and do that respec and go for that Weapon Master that I just showed you. Alert is going to be very useful because this carries over in your wild shape forms, so you're always going to be starting first, and it can also set you up for some very powerful combos in some of your Myrmidon forms. So at level 9 you unlock level 5 spells, the two most important ones here being Conjure Elemental and Mass Cure Wounds. Conjure Elemental is going to be very powerful once you get level 6 spells, that way you can upcast a Water Myrmidon. And then Mass Cure Wounds is good because this uses an action, whereas your wild shapes are bonus actions. So what you can actually do with this is you can do some really nice combos where you can buff up your entire party with certain gear using Mass Cure Wounds and then go right into a wild shape, or you can come out of a wild shape and use Mass Cure Wounds to buff up your entire party. So I think this is something that a lot of people don't really know about or don't consider with a Druid, especially a Moon Druid. So at level 10 you get some massive upgrades to Moon Druid. The first one here is that you get an extra attack, and then the second one, you unlock your Myrmidon forms. And the two most powerful ones in my opinion would be the Air Myrmidon and the Water Myrmidon, which ironically those are the ones that you had to get weapon proficiencies for. So for the cantrip you can pick whatever you want here, I just go for Produce Flame. So at level 11 you unlock level 6 spells, and you get a very powerful spell that most builds that multiclass with a Moon Druid will not get, and that is Hero's Feast. Hero's Feast is super powerful. Not only will it buff up your entire party with health, but you also get advantage on wisdom saves, and you can use this right after every long rest. And finally, we hit level 12, and now we get our third feat. So if you chose Weapon Master at level 8, now is your chance to go ahead and pick up Alert. Next up, we could take a look at the equipment for HALSIN, or for a Moon Druid in general, and the good news is that you will not have to worry too much about equipment in this game, because most equipment does not work while you're in wild shape form. The bad news is that that just leaves so much wasted potential, and it can kind of get a little bit boring, right? Because you will not be able to enhance your character through gear. And yeah, that's really the trade-off with a Moon Druid. So there's really only a few items that work well here. Shapeshifter Hat will give you a bonus to your wild shape charge. Armor of Moon Basking is the best armor for HALSIN that you get in Act 3. You will get that +2 bonus to your armor class carrying over into your wild shape form, and then also the 22 temporary hit points will carry over. And you also have Boots of Striding. What Boots of Striding will do is, it's kind of bugged right now with wild shape forms, where once you go into your wild shape form, you're basically immune to being knocked prone. So if you have Boots of Striding and you're not using this on a caster, you might as well put this on HALSIN. And then I also like Corvid Token because the jump and flying speed increase. Also the Featherfall carries over while you're in wild shape form. You could also go for something like the Shapeshifter's Boon Ring. This is another item that works while you're in wild shape form, but it's not really that beneficial. It's just a bonus to your ability checks, not really going to be useful in combat. So I tend to leave this one out. And then from there, what you really want to do is focus on initiative if you can. So I go for Hellrider Longbow, but there's also a lot of good early game items that you can get here, like Sentinel Shield or Stalker Gloves. Anything that will help your initiative while you're in human form. That way you're able to go into your wild shape form earlier on in combat if you happen to start combat while you're in human form. And then what I did from there was I just went with Hellrider's Pride and the Whispering Promise Ring. That way I can buff up my party with some really powerful buffs. As you guys have seen that with the Mass Cure Wounds combination. You could also use the Amulet of Restoration and use a Mass Healing Word to buff up your party there. The problem is it's going to conflict with your wild shape because they are both bonus actions. So eventually you're probably going to want to swap Amulet of Restoration out. And then what I did from there was I just went ahead and went for the Staff of Spell Power. This isn't the best staff in the game, but you probably want to leave those better quarterstaves to your pure casters and go for something like Staff of Spell Power on HALSIN. That way you can get an extra level 6 spell per long rest with Arcane Battery, which means that you will be able to use Hero's Feast and then also upcast a Conjure Elemental, for example the Water Myrmidon. So that's what I did there. And then I also went for the Shield of Shielding just to give me that Shield Abjuration spell, just to give you a little bit more of a tankiness kind of vibe to HALSIN and for Moon Druids. And then the last one for the tankiness vibe was After Death Do Us Part. This thing is bugged right now. It's supposed to give you a debuff with Shadow Possession, but Shadow Possession never comes up whenever you go down. So basically this is an all-out tank ring. Whenever you do go down, you revive instantly with half health. You might as well have that on HALSIN because Moon Druids are pretty tanky to begin with. So this is just going to make you even tankier for those higher difficulties. And that is all I did here to gear up HALSIN. So now we're going to take a look at a combat showcase featuring HALSIN, and that way you guys can get some examples on some kind of tactics that you can use while you are in some of your wild shape forms. And in this video I'm going to showcase 2 wild shape forms, the first one being the Water Myrmidon. And just keep in mind I do have some buffs on here just to make this fight go by a little bit faster, since these enemies have higher health on the higher difficulties. So I got haste, also enlarge, and I am using Elixir of Cloud Giant Strength. The cool thing is elixirs carry over into your wild shape forms, so you can always get the benefit of elixirs with your Moon Druid. So what you can do with the Water Myrmidon, especially if you have high initiative, which you should because of the alert feat, is that you can actually use Healing Vapors, which is basically just like Create Water, and you can make all of these enemies vulnerable to your cold damage. You only want to use this on the first turn, and hopefully before the other enemies start their turn. That way they're all topped off at full health, and you can go ahead and not have to worry about healing them, because this does heal your enemies at the same time. So since I am on the same initiative as my Water Myrmidon here, I'm just going to go ahead and let my Water Myrmidon use Healing Vapors instead. That way I can get an extra attack with HALSIN. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this Water Myrmidon over just a bit in order to try to get all of these enemies wet here. And so now what we could do is we could go back into HALSIN and we could do a couple of nice attacks, since all of these enemies are vulnerable to cold damage now. So I like to use Explosive Icicle. I'm just going to use it over here. That way we can take these enemies out. And now we have an extra attack thanks to haste. We can only use Explosive Icicle once per turn, but that's okay because we do have Hemel Strike as well. And you never want to use the main hand attack with the Water Myrmidon. It's actually inferior to the Hemel Strike in every way, because the Hemel Strike can actually chill your enemies and do extra damage on top of that. So we could go ahead and go into Hemel Strike here, and we could just take this enemy out as well. And I guess I'll attack this enemy too. And now let's go ahead and, rather than warp, since this uses a bonus action, let's go ahead and fly up here. And I might as well go out of wild shape, and we can showcase another wild shape here. So there's so many good wild shapes. HALSIN has Cave Bear, which is exclusive to him. This is a really good wild shape that you can use early on in the game, but there's so many good wild shapes. I can't really discuss all of them in detail here, but you know, the Deep Rothe is really good. The Owlbear is amazing. The Saber-Tooth Tiger is one of my favorites for single target DPS. Air Myrmidon is really good for CCs because you can stun bosses with this. It's super overpowered. And then you also have the amazing Water Myrmidon. So I'm going to go into the Owlbear here, because why not? It is an amazing form. And we're going to go ahead and end our turn here. So we also have some nice summons that we can use with HALSIN, like our Dryad and our Wood Woad. The Dryad is really good because they have Spike Growth, so that way you don't have to make HALSIN use Spike Growth, and HALSIN can go ahead and do whatever else he wants with that action. So I'm going to go ahead and just use Spike Growth over here on these enemies. And you can also use your Shillelagh as a bonus action, and yeah, this thing actually does a lot of damage, just the regular melee attack. It is pretty bad on accuracy, but when it does hit, you can do like a good 20 to 30 damage with this thing. So you can also go into the Wood Woad, and the Wood Woad has another nice CC here with Entangle. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw on an Entangle, like, let's just go right over here. Let's put it on this Archer, and we'll go ahead and end our turn there. So now we're in turn 2, and the first thing I'm going to do is go into my Water Myrmidon and use Explosive Icicle right here, since I can AoE 2 enemies. So let's go ahead and do that. And then now we could go into our Owlbear. Now the Owlbear has an amazing ability called Crushing Flight, and if you guys haven't known about this yet, you know, once you enlarge your Owlbear with another party member like a wizard, they grow to an extremely large size and weight. And with that weight, they basically can do some crazy damage if they jump from a very high location and potentially one-shot bosses. I'm looking at you, Grim. So we're not going to be one-shotting bosses here, but I am going to be just jumping over here with Crushing Flight and maybe knocking both of these archers prone, or at least one of them. So you can use Rupture. Rupture is a nice AoE ability, but it does also target your allies, so you have to be careful about when you use that. I'm just going to go ahead and use the regular attack here and take both of these enemies out. And then we can move over here and target this enemy. Hopefully I can go that far. I know I'm in spike growth. So there we go. Now there's no way I can make it over to this spot, so we will just have to take care of this enemy in the next turn. So the Dryad can do some nice damage with Strength and Shillelagh, so I might as well go ahead and attack Knobster here while I can. First, let's take off Spike Growth since there's no need for that anymore. And the bad part is, as you can see, it's only 55% hit chance here. That's really the downside to these Dryads. But 18 damage, it can go all the way up to 35, is not bad, especially with just a level 4 spell summon. So I will take it, especially on higher difficulties. So now we're in our final turn here, and we'll just clean up with HALSIN with a Crushing Flight on Knobster over here. So I hope you guys enjoyed my HALSIN Pure Moon Druid build, and I tried to keep this as simple and as true to HALSIN in this game as I could, and that just involved going 12 points into Moon Druid. This build works out so well, especially on higher difficulties like Honor Mode. The only downside to Moon Druids is that they just don't get enough of benefit out of their equipment, and that is the part that leaves me very sad with Moon Druids. But they're powerful, they're tanky, they do great damage, they're very versatile, just like a Druid would be. And yeah, I'm thinking on maybe doing Minthara next, so stay tuned for that one, and I will see you in the next video.